Hey everyone, before you enjoy the video about being a bar during COVID shutdown, just wanted to give you a quick update. As of December 23rd, the District of Columbia has shut down indoor dining and our owners had no choice but to close Reliable Tavern for all service and lay off all their employees, including me. So we're trying to move forward, but we're going to be closed for a while, hoping to get to the other side of this. Ben the Bar Guy videos will probably keep happening, but other than that, Reliable Tavern is closed. So keep that in mind while you're watching the video. Give me some comments, maybe a like, a subscribe would be great. Trying to get to 100 subscribers is a big deal for any YouTuber. So if you guys can help me get there, it'd be greatly appreciated. And enjoy the video as much as you can. Hey everyone, Ben the Bar Guy back with another video to help you make better drinks. And today, we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna take you through what it's like to be a bar during the COVID economic shutdown. The ins, the outs, the numbers. We'll see what you think at the end. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you like what you see, get yourself a drink, make it a stiff one, and let's make better drinks. Alright guys, Ben the Bar Guy here, and today's episode is taking you through from the inside what it's like to be a bar during the COVID economic shutdown. The ins, the outs, the dollars and cents, how we staying alive, what have we gotten from the government, what we haven't gotten from the government, what we paid already in taxes, everything. We're gonna go through it all. First of all, we're gonna do a little timeline. We're gonna run down how everything went down in DC because not every district or state is the same. And then number two, we'll go through where was Reliable before COVID. Were we a business that was in working order? Because, shucks, if we were a bad business that wasn't doing very well, you would think, well, who cares if you're shutting down now? You were going to shut down anyway. Well, I'll show you that we were actually a thriving business before the March 16th shutdown. And then we can go through the actual numbers of some of the realistic economics of the bar business and how it works in DC and how the rules have affected the business. So let's go over the timeline first. On March 16th, DC shuts down bars, effectively altogether closes bars and restaurants. It does allow, for the first time in our history with a tavern license, to sell off-premise booze, wine, and cocktails, which normally was not under our purview under our tavern license. During that time period, we set up to go and carry out, but we had to lay off all of our employees except for myself, and I'm the general manager. I kept the lights on, so to speak, and also did all the to-go and carry out throughout the week. My business owners threw in extra money into the last paycheck to kind of fill out the paychecks of the employees we had to lay off, and then those employees all went on unemployment. And at the time, there was a federal program that allowed for an extra $600 to go into their paychecks on top of what they could get from the DC unemployment program. The max is $444, I believe. So they were getting $1,044 a week. The business, however, cratered. We did get a micro grant from DC very early on for about $6,000. We also got the federal PPP payroll protection program grant that allowed the business to pay me basically to keep the lights on. Now during that time period, our sales plummeted to about 1/10 of what we were doing prior to the business being shut down. Now, in July 22nd exactly, DC enters a phase 2 reopening with certain guidelines. Some of the phase 2 guidelines were as follows. Every table had to be 6 feet apart, and there was no seating at the bar itself. If you were seated at the bar, it had to be a bar that wasn't in front of a bartender or a bartender worked at. In other words, if you had a secondary bar that no one worked at, people could sit there. Otherwise, everyone had to be 6 feet apart in parties of less than 6 people total, 6 or less. Our capacity was limited to 50% or less. We'll get back to capacity later. Our hours were limited from 8 a.m. to midnight, although we were only open 5 p.m. every day anyway. But we had a tavern license which did allow us to be open after midnight until 2 a.m. every day of the week except Friday and Saturday, where we got till 3 a.m. on a normal license. We were not allowed to do that in this case, and we were closed at midnight every night. We also needed a reservation system to prevent overcrowding. We, of course, had never had a reservation system as a tavern, but we set one up with Yelp. That eventually then was too expensive to carry on after their free trial, and now we have an email system for reservations at Reliable. Of course, guests always were supposed to wear their mask unless seated and drinking at the time or eating. Music must be kept to a minimum volume. All employees had to wear face mask coverings at all times. And all bars and taverns and restaurants must have a food menu. For our part, we put hand sanitizer at every bar. We also put up signs that asked for guests to put on their masks whenever we were coming over to their table. We set up systems of keeping track for the DC Health Department, which was also required in these phase 2 guidelines. Setting up a record of who came into your bar, getting a way of contacting them in case the DC Health Department needed it. We also set up stations inside the bathroom with paper towels and not using our hand dryers because hand dryers at the time were said to spread the virus, aerosol it, which we didn't want to do. We also set up spray bottles of bleach solution that then the guests could use on their own if they wanted to clean anything in the bathrooms or anywhere else for that matter. We also, we're cleaning every day of the week instead of 4 times a week like we were prior to Reliable Tavern closing down because of COVID. So we were cleaning more often to make sure the space was clean and thoroughly wiped down every night so that people could feel comfortable about coming in. We've also put in a Rheem Halo air purifying system as of late, which uses an oxidation and ionizing system to kill bacteria and viruses in the air. As air cycles through the air conditioning system, it basically destroys it with those processes. During phase 2 reopening, the business, because we were closed at midnight, suffered greatly. We did about 1/7 to 1/8 the sales that we were doing prior to shutting down. Since July, we've been in phase 2 guidelines until just recently. In late November, DC has further crimped down on bars and restaurants. We are now supposed to be closed at 10 instead of midnight. And we've seen our sales plummet once again to devastating effects. To give you an idea, we sold $41 last night on a Wednesday. 41. Not 4,100, not 410, 41. $41. So, how was Reliable doing before the shutdown? Well, we opened May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, 2017. And when we began, we struggled a little bit, but we're keeping our heads above water. We had low overhead here. We are in a neighborhood with still relatively low retail rents. It was a gentrifying neighborhood named Petworth that was starting to blossom after being largely downtrodden for decades, but the bar was doing quite well. So from 2017 to 2018, we grew by 10% year over year. 2018 to 2019, we hit a boom. We grew by 26%, and we were doing quite well. In the first quarter of 2020, we had already surpassed the last quarter in total dollars, and we were going to probably surpass the first quarter from the previous year, which was a record quarter. Because we closed in March 16th and the quarter ends March 31st, and we had no sales from March 16th to March 31st, we would have passed probably with those 2 weeks all records. As far as month by month, 6 of the previous 8 months prior to March, so that's February backwards, were record months, meaning they were each individually a new high water mark in terms of monthly sales. So to say that Reliable Tavern was doing well would be an understatement. We were growing fast, we were doing very well. We also had very little staff turnover. Our staff had been the same and constant for a year and a half prior, Reliable Tavern was doing very well. Its ratings online, on Yelp, on Google, were very, very high. My staff, because they had stuck around so long, were in the groove. We're very good at making cocktails. And so our ratings were very high. When you have a comfortable staff that knows exactly how to do their job and has gotten a lot of practice and reps in shifts, it's very easy to have time to make guests happy, and my bartenders had done a great job doing that. Lots of landlords in the district have not forgiven rents, but they've allowed rents to go unpaid, which makes them pretty critical to being open and keeping businesses open, is that landlords were willing to do that. But at the same time, that rent isn't going away. It's just piling up on a debit sheet somewhere to be paid at a later time. We also are in the process of getting what DC calls a resiliency grant, and these are given out by the Deputy Mayor's Office, and they are distributing to bars awards up to $10,000. As far as these grants and resiliency grants and the micro grant, it's $16,000. So that's not a lot of money. To put that in perspective, DC has taken sales tax from this business over the course of 2020. That sales tax equals $24,500. So the government has given back to us $16,000. Now, there is a phrase, do not look gift horses in the mouth. And the idea is, if you're getting a gift, say yes. Well, we're saying yes, but when the gift horse is your horse. In any case, when you do apply for these grants, you oftentimes have to pay for a certificate of good standing, which means that you are in good working order license-wise with the District of Columbia. You also need a clean hand certificate from the Office of Tax and Revenue, showing that you've paid your taxes on time for the year. Now, those cost money. We also have had to pay for a license, which means a tavern license. We pay approximately $4,500 a year for that, despite not having the ability to use that license, in which we are listed as being open until 3 a.m. on the weekends and 2 a.m. every other day. They have not given us a break on our licensing fee. We've paid full freight for that. The business has paid payroll taxes. We do 2 payrolls a month, but if you did the math there, that's roughly $3,000 a month times 12 months. So they're going to pay roughly $36,000 in payroll taxes on top of the $24,500 that they paid in sales taxes. But we got $16,000 back from the District of Columbia. Rent in our building wasn't relatively high for the District of Columbia, but rent is high in Washington, D.C. relative to other cities generally. I won't say what our rent is on this video, but I will say that it is a large sum of money at this point, roughly 9 months of rent compiled. All right, let's get into some of the rules and how they affected our sales and our ability to actually be a place where people enjoyed a drink or two. Firstly, I think the nature of a tavern is that it's convivial but also communal. And obviously during a pandemic, that's going to be pretty tough, especially when cutting your capacities down to 50% or less. But the 50% capacity rule in particular crushed us for a simple reason. Maximum capacity number is largely derived from fire code. So the idea is that that's the maximum number of people that will be in your restaurant that can get out safely if there was the unfortunate circumstance of a fire. Now those rules make lots of sense, but as far as space goes, Reliable Tavern could actually fit many more humans in, as far as comfortably in. But we don't have an egress at our downstairs bar, so the number's 98. But here's the problem. When we cut to 50% capacity, the fire code is no longer relevant. We're obviously going to be far below 98, no matter what. So if you're cutting it to 50, wouldn't it make more sense to have the spacing of our bar determine how many seats I can fit? That would make sense, right? Social distancing should be the determining factor on how we social distance in our bar. But instead they used fire code capacity numbers and cut it to 50. Now here's another problem. When you're staffing a bar and you have two different bars, let's say one upstairs, one downstairs like we do, it's very hard to drive business at the other bar sometimes, especially when it's downstairs and you may not know about it. One of the rules to phase 2 reopening was that we can't do trivia, we can't do comedy, we can't do pool, as in billiards. So we were really limited on the things that got people to go downstairs. Also, our most popular time downstairs at the downstairs bar was late at night on weekends. Well, that obviously had been eliminated by the midnight closing rule. So opening up our downstairs bar would actually have cost our bar money because we would have staffed a bartender downstairs. If you can't generate sales, then it's costing you money to have an extra bartender on. On top of that, no bartender wants to work a slow shift in front of 2 or 3 people and not make money. So the downstairs bar had to close. So effectively, when you cut to 50% capacity, you cut us down to more like 33% capacity. We went from 98 maximum capacity to being able to fit socially distanced at just our upstairs bar, which was the only one that we could effectively staff, to about 32 seats. When you're cutting capacity and the ability to drive business to a part of the bar that may not have as many people naturally there, you lose the ability to get sales. When you have a time period cut from your original license period, a lot of these sales that we would have generated late at night is going to be quite heavy in terms of losses. So that really crushed our business. Now the argument from the DC health officials is just that bars aren't essential. Eating food is essential, so as long as we're serving food, we become essential kind of. But whatever was happening late night at our bar is just deemed non-essential and likely to spread a virus. But the problem is that they have no proof of that, especially if we're socially distanced and wearing masks and having guests behave themselves. I don't see why they assumed Reliable Tavern couldn't be a safe place to be at 1 o'clock, 2 a.m., midnight, 11 a.m., 9:30, 8. They don't have really any evidence that says we were certainly not safe and keeping people safe as much as possible and following the rules late at night rather than early at night. And so that's been a very costly assumption for many bars, I'm sure, but for Reliable Tavern especially. It would seem prudent to let bars prove themselves rather than being treated like a monolith. The public health officials' assumptions that all bars are exactly the same and therefore need to be treated as semi-essential or whatever we get treated as seems a bit off. And in a city the size of Washington, D.C., which is not that big, you would think perhaps we could have a situation where bars could at least prove themselves to be safe, following the rules, and be open a little bit later. In addition, the ban on things like trivia, comedy, pool, games, darts, things that bars live on and use to drive sales, is somewhat arbitrary. The CDC has come out and said that this disease is largely not transmitted by fomites or known surfaces, but they have disallowed us from doing it anyway, which really hurts a way of driving business. But that's the point, isn't it? They don't want us to drive business, they want us to shut down. But I don't think they see the long-term effects of shutting down the entire bar industry. So just to give you an idea nationally how bad it is, in New York, who had very similar restrictions to us, they expect 60% of bars to close, which is pretty devastating. And one of the biggest bar owning groups here in DC are the Hilton brothers, and they closed 7 bars in October, and they issued a pretty stern statement advising, in fact, their friends in the industry to really look at the situation and with no real help coming, to basically shut yourself down and save as much money as possible. And maybe you can come back You close down 7 bars, consolidate what you have, and maybe you can come back with 1 bar, was what I read in between the lines from that statement. But essentially, the bar and restaurant industry is never going to be the same. And in terms of my staff, many have looked to completely other businesses or different ways of employing themselves. Some of them aren't even bartenders anymore. And that's a shame, because they were in the top 1% of 1% of bartenders. They were veritably good. And for them to lose their profession and then have to change professions in order to feed themselves is a problem. And I don't think the bar industry or the government officials pushing this realize how bad this is. In case you guys think that this is a one-time event, it's never going to happen again, and we'll recover within a U-curve. That's not how it works. When bars close, it's relatively permanent. And when people change professional jobs, they change permanently. And when people move, they often stay where they move. And right now, a lot of bartenders are headed out to the country where there are less draconian rules and maybe back to where their family is. Many people are not staying in cities at all. So it's a reverse urbanization at this point. But in case you guys think that this hasn't happened before, it has. Prohibition in 1920 was passed. It was called the Volstead Act nationally, but it was paired with the 18th Amendment, passed by 46 of 48 states, believe it or not. And that banned the sale, distribution, and distillation of alcoholic beverages or spirits. You could still drink them. So if you were rich and had a big wine cellar or something, you could drink that wine for as long as you wanted. But you couldn't make, distribute, or sell alcohol anywhere in the country. And the Volstead Act enabled that legislation to have teeth. Well, the results were very similar to what we're seeing today. Bartenders either left to prohibition-free Europe or changed professions altogether. The bar craft withered and died. Most bartenders who worked throughout the prohibition itself were working for gangsters and speakeasies. The gangsters were from local crime syndicates that then got so rich off these speakeasies and distributing and manufacturing alcohol illicitly that they became nationally syndicated and became the mafia, which tortured American cities for decades to come. But in the meantime, during Prohibition, their speakeasies were run by bartenders who weren't very good. And the drinks went from being well-made, stirred-up Manhattans made by professional, white-coated, and very sound bartenders who practiced and trained their profession their whole life, to people making juice-laden, cloying, sloppily measured drinks like the Harvey Wallbanger, which is called the Harvey Wallbanger. So the craft died. And after World War II, Prohibition long over, those bartenders didn't come back. The skills and talents didn't come back, especially for cocktails. And a lot of the baby boomer generation decided to take the measuring and the skill and technique out of the hands of the bartenders and just order simple things, what we call one-and-ones: vodka and soda, rum and Coke, whiskey and Coke, right? And then there's no cocktail there. Those are just highballs. They also liked pre-made mixes. It was the era of TV dinners, but also sour mix and making things easy. So rather than use fresh citrus and wait for your drink, it was much better to have the bartender just have sour mix on the gun. But the professionalism of making a good cocktail that's balanced and delicious went out the window. Then the baby boomers turned to vodka, the most neutral of spirits. And while there's nothing wrong with vodka, because it's neutral, it also allowed for the bartender to not screw up their drink. So they could order vodka and feel safe that they were getting a drink that was at least somewhat balanced in what they were used to, and the bartender couldn't screw it up with a neutral spirit. It took 80 years for the bartending industry to return to its pre-prohibition glory. In the early 2000s, a bar in New York called Milk and Honey opens, and it's really the first bar that cuts its own ice, and it followed in the footsteps of a 1990s bar called the Rainbow Room, using fresh citrus juice and better well spirits. And all of a sudden, cocktails start to boom again. It was a slow process over the next decade, and a lot of people had to go read a lot of old books, and we had to suffer a lot of bad cocktail menus at places trying their best but not doing a very good job yet because the art and craft was lost. So, in case you think that this hasn't happened before, it has. It's a devastating effect. This is a neo-prohibition on bars. It comes from slightly different places. During Prohibition, Prohibitionist reasoning was that alcoholism was bad and destroying America. It was correlated to low productivity. It was correlated to violence and crime. And it was correlated to obviously just alcoholism, right? So alcohol became the bad guy, and we devised a way to eliminate it and tell people what to do. The problem is that 14 years later, it was repealed because it was a mistake in the first place. Still to this day, no amendment has ever been enacted and passed to directly repeal a previous amendment. If that's not a tacit sign of failure, I don't know what is. But in addition, alcoholism rates had gone up during Prohibition. Crime had gone up during Prohibition. Lack of productivity? Well, we famously went into a depression, likely related, at least in part, to Prohibition. And violent crime and general sadness and melees went up during Prohibition. So it did nothing of what it was promised. Just like today, we will likely see nothing of what is promised from our current prohibitionists. The neo-prohibitionists promising us that if only our bars close at 10 p.m. or 12 midnight, instead of their paid-for hours on their licenses, that this illness will go away. Interesting, but probably a broken promise. So, not to leave on a sad note, but this is dire. I had to make this video. There was no choice, because we may not be making videos for long anywhere about cocktail bartending. And so a lot of the Ben the Bar Guy project in itself was an effort to make sure that the craft lives after this disaster. And I will do my best forever to keep this craft alive. And my owners are virtual heroes for even attempting to stay open during this time and not taking the Hilton Brothers' advice. Wise as it may be, what they're doing is inspirational to me, and I appreciate them. And my bartenders who are still with me and showing up every day for work, they too are inspirational. They're the reason I keep working, and doing videos like this is possible because they are able to still keep me inspired. So, for you guys out there thinking about this sort of thing, I've tried to give you the bartenders, aka the managers, aka the bar's perspective on being a bar during the COVID economic shutdown. I hope that makes some sense to you guys. I hope you can see where some of the rules may be a bit draconian and need to be further thought out. I hope that you guys stay safe from COVID. Take care. This has been the Bar Guy, and per usual, to better drinks. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video, and as always, gotta give some props and love to Reliable Tavern, my employer for the last 4 years where I've been running the bar, and these guys are what make these videos possible. You can hit me with a like and subscribe button over here, or some video recommendations over here, all of which will keep these coming. I appreciate you guys, and like always, to better drinks, Nux, beer mug, daiquiri. Love you, mean it.